Hello and welcome to the Argyle CFO Leadership Forum, Future of Finance. My name is Vicki Lynn Brunska with Argyle. It's great to have everyone joining us today. Just a couple of notes before I turn things over to our esteemed speaker. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience today. At any time during the event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, and those do include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your question at the end of the session. And now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Blake Mulligan, Director of Solutions Consulting at Lease Accelerator. We are so excited to have Blake with us for a thought leadership presentation titled Beyond Lease Accounting Compliance, Optimizing Efficiency. Welcome, Blake, and over to you.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Vicki Lynn. Really appreciate the introduction. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Really thank you for spending the time with us today. So quickly, just want to introduce myself. I know Vicki Lynn's, kind of introduced me already, but I've been here at, kind of Insight Software, Lease Accelerator, for almost 2 years now. I started my career out with Ernst & Young as a consultant in the banking and finance space, specifically working with banks that had large trading operations. So always been working in the finance side with either banks or with previous startups as well. Additionally, my background specifically is around operational and regulatory change. So helping clients adapt to either new regulations or maybe once they've already adapted to those regulations, optimizing that process with automation and increased controls. So let's run through the agenda for today. We're going to start out with the market shift from compliance to ROI, right? So I already kind of teased that out a little bit before. Most folks have already adopted to the new compliance regulations, so they're really not new anymore. So folks are looking to shift. What's next? What can we do? What else can we do in this space? So that leads us to uncovering manual data and processes across stakeholders. So working cross-functionally within the organization to really improve processes. We're going to get into managing the lease lifecycle at the enterprise level. So beyond just the lease accounting, what happens within our lease lifecycle and where can we take advantage? Going to drill in a little bit to the value of asset level data, automating those data flows, and then ultimately into best practices. So going to get, start big picture and then get into some very specific examples. Now, throughout this webinar, we are going to have polling questions. So here's polling question number 1. Are you currently using any tools to manage your lease accounting process? Yes. Spreadsheets. Yes. Basic lease accounting calculator. Yes. Integrated lease management and accounting software, or D, I'm not sure. Now, really the difference between B and C, for those that are wondering, B is, we have a software provider, but it's really just a calculator for a lease accounting, whereas C is a full-fledged solution that manages your leases, does the lease admin and the accounting as well. We'll give everyone a quick second to respond to this poll before we move on. All right. Thanks for the responses, everybody. So let's start with the market shifting to generating some ROI, some value. On the left, we see where everyone started, lease accounting compliance. So reactive, right? Just lease accounting, standards driven, audit driven. Basically, hey, you have to do this now, so do it. And that's what people were doing, right? Just, I got to get compliant and I need to do it before year end or before this comes into effect. Now with that, a lot of people had fragmented data processes, information in different places. So it really was a kind of a scramble to get everything together and get it submitted. Now that that's done, and people have kind of done this a couple years in a row, it gets into this lease lifecycle management. So what else can we do? Where is there value? So we're shifting towards proactive and cross-functional processes. It's value-driven, right? Where can we generate ROI through cost savings, and new free cash flow? Where can we, kind of take these individual silos that we used to have and create one system of record, or a data lake, for example? Going cross-functional, multi-stakeholders, multiple budgets, and ultimately consolidation between applications and multiple vendors. All right, polling question number 2. What are the greatest challenges you face in managing your lease lifecycle? Option A, resources or battling priorities. B, month-end close. C, process management. Or D, all of the above. All right. Thank you, everybody, for those responses. So what are the problems for each process owner? Let's kind of dive in individually to the segments or the processes of lease lifecycle management. And we're going to start with lease compliance. It's kind of the theme of today. Everything started with lease accounting compliance, record to report. And ultimately, we see the owner here is the controllership. And at the time, 2019 was a point solution, either being Microsoft Excel or, a simple system that just does the lease accounting, close the books every month, get it in, and meet the bare minimum from an audit compliance standpoint. Oftentimes, we see the problems here: manual work, poor upstream controls, bad data, and having to adjust entries either outside, if you were using a system, or again, right, if you're using Excel, that is all manual processes. So very labor intensive, lots of manual activities, and communication back and forth with email that really didn't have strong controls. So brings us to today, and we see all these different functions. So in this slide, we get a glimpse of all of those components of the lease lifecycle. They are individual silos, each with its own owner. It starts with capital planning. Ideally, the treasury is in charge, but in practice, oftentimes not really. We see that in large decentralized organizations, individual business units do their own planning, and treasury neither has visibility nor control on the lease versus buy process. Similarly, procurement activities are splintered. A lease is a combination of procurement and financing. So unless there's someone who can see the big picture and negotiate at scale, there's not a lot of money left on the table because the lessors are really calling the shots, right? No taking advantage of the full scale of your company's leasing. Then there's the challenge of managing the equipment leases and planning ahead to be able to return and refresh leased assets on time to derive the optimal financial benefits from the lease. Similar considerations apply to real estate, but usually it's a separate set of people managing those leases, and they should really be collaborating very closely with corporate treasury, accounting, and even ESG as we start to look forward and see that become more prominent in today's corporations. So here we can see each pillar of the lease lifecycle and what problem we need to solve for at each stage of the process. Poor decision-making from a finance perspective, data abstraction challenges, overpaying for leases, and thereby squandering the economics of the lease, or data, loads and loads of manual effort, resulting in risk of human error and material misstatement. Now, also layered over this are the applications that we have here at Insight Software. Now, highlighted in this bottom line on platform is the SaaS platform. So knowing that all of these are interconnected and built on the same database So truly it is one system. Now, over the last year or so, our team has been working with some of our larger customers doing health checks of their lease lifecycle. So using the model that we just shared, we have found that just optimizing their process asset lifecycle manager and the lease accounting manager better, they can achieve significant dollar savings in avoided costs. So, really what this is saying is that, take a client of ours that in 2019 adopted and they just were doing the bare minimum from a compliance standpoint. Well, we worked with them through this health check process and basically said, hey, there's tons of value, tons of opportunity that you can take advantage of throughout the application that you already own, right? So some examples in here, you see health check, reducing our close by 2 days, eliminating outside spreadsheets that we were running to work with end of term events and try to get responses from the various process owners. And then with that, we also put together a schedule of when they could adopt other applications without being overwhelming to take advantage and really, really work through the whole lease lifecycle. So that's all fine and dandy, but how do we make the business case for this and what can we expect? So let's start with just the lease versus buy here, and we'll work through each process. Now, every lease should ideally start with a lease versus buy analysis. To do this effectively, the treasury team should be able to dictate and periodically update the discount rate and other standard criteria. The field offices and individual requesters can then simply use the standard template to make their request via email. So what's important there? Treasury, controller, someone centrally owning all of the data and pushing that out so that everyone out in the field that's requesting new equipment is working with the same data set, centralizing it on both the data front, and then when the requests come in, centralizing it again so one team can view that and can see the whole company-wide lease portfolio and the requests that are going out. Each analysis is stored permanently as well in the system for full audit purposes. Now we're adding the financing pillar here, Pure Lease Marketplace. The system can use the information on the lease versus buy document that is automatically generated to bid out the RFP to targeted sets of lessors on the lessor marketplace and have them compete on pricing, so the finance, to get the most competitive lease rate and the most flexible end of term options to protect the interest of the lessee. Centralized bidding and benefit from scale and use of lease lines for frequently needed homogeneous items scattered across the organization. So again, centralizing the whole process and making sure we have complete visibility and audit tracking. All right, so now we've actually signed our lease. The information can be transferred into the Asset Lifecycle Manager and supplemented with asset level details downloaded directly from the lessor's database. This straight-through processing eliminates human error and saves a ton of data entry effort. So again, starting to layer in some automation. Then, from the time the data enters the Asset Lifecycle Manager, it can be used for operational reporting, end of term planning, and processing. And of course, lease accounting. It's complete and accurate and available at the push of a button at the time of fiscal close. No more back and forth communication and follow up to get updates from the field. Finally, we're actually, sorry, I'm skipping ahead here. So then, there we go. Sorry. So now Real Estate Manager does for real estate leases what Asset Lifecycle Manager does for equipment leases, except that it's typically a different group involved and a different data sets and activities. So a dedicated space for a real estate team or a legal team to view lease contracts, run reports on real estate portfolio and all of the unique information that they need that ultimately is separate from accounting. Because it's fully integrated, the two systems communicate with one another so that any update made on the real estate front is automatically passed to Lease Accounting Manager to update and generate the accounting. So the last piece of the puzzle is ESG reporting. We can leverage the tracking of emissions data at asset level and real estate space level to gain visibility into emissions and plan ahead to reduce the carbon footprint of the organization. Data is king. So if you have the data, reporting and audit becomes so much easier. On to our third poll. What other challenges related to lease lifecycle management are you looking to address this year? A, lessor, specifically sales type or finance leases. B, emissions tracking. C, ERP integrations. D, system consolidation. E, real estate administration. And F, none of the above. All right, so let's talk about managing the lease lifecycle at the enterprise level. I like this slide just because it shows all of the particular decisions and events that happen over the course of any leased assets. We see all the way from start through end of term. And end of term, right, that goes beyond the end of the initial term, getting into those partial end of term events, buyouts, renewals, etc. Again, I like this because it just shows how complex and all the individual pieces that go into this and why, right, having a solution to track all of this can be incredibly beneficial. So why do assets matter? Ultimately, assets are actionable. So whether it's owned, leased, or embedded, tracking and having that asset level data is incredibly helpful. On the real estate side, any property or space within a property, so offices, conference rooms, exterior signage, parking lots, all of that can be tracked individually and also rolled up into one kind of parent asset as well. Down at the bottom, we see scope 2. So from an emissions perspective, we've got that designated there. On the equipment side, any piece of equipment that is physically distinct or independently identifiable can be tracked as such. So if we have an MSA with multiple servers, machine tools, whatever it may be, we can track it at the full schedule MSA level, run our accounting at that level, but ultimately still maintain individual asset attributes. That can be serial numbers, that can be asset owners. So when it comes time to do a renewal, maybe it's a partial renewal, you just pick the assets that are being renewed versus returned. Makes that process incredibly automated. So project drivers. Quick kind of recap here. What are some common project drivers that we've seen? A lot of it does come from the CFO. So looking to consolidate real estate administration and lease accounting. Maybe doing some automation around equipment lifecycle to help cut down on costs and risks associated with end of term or evergreen or really leases that are going month to month. Sometimes it's coming from procurement or treasury looking to improve their spend management and financing execution. We've started to see some VP of sustainability, but again, a little lower on the list there. And then lastly, just the CFO maybe looking to support a move to subscription revenue. So, doing as a service type revenue generating models. Of course, those are typically embedded lessor leases, and that can get quite complicated. Now, this brings us to what I believe is our last poll of the day. Have your organization adopted any processes outside of lease accounting to drive better leasing decisions? So yes, we're making better decisions on the front end. So running some sort of lease versus buy, or maybe centralizing our financing sourcing initiatives. Yes, but on the back end. So end of term, we're running reports, sending automated notifications to our asset owners, asking for updates around end of term. C, yes, doing both, beginning and the end. Fantastic. D, no, we're still focused on sustainable compliance. And then E, not really sure where we are on the journey today. So let's talk about control with the lease lifecycle through straight through processing. Really busy slide here, right? But what it shows us is all of the different pieces of the lease lifecycle journey, and really all the different points of where data is stored, whether that's procurement, asset management, in your ERP, SEC financial statements, FP&A, etc. It's all there. So there's all these different pieces that ultimately make up this puzzle. This is a great opportunity for integrations. So, we do have integration opportunities available for all of these to help minimize any human error and really shore up those controls. I want to show this really quickly, see where some of those opportunities can come from between sourcing, administration, end of term, and integrations. Talked about this, but just a nice summary here. So one of those control points, we've talked through it, is a lease versus buy. Now this one in particular, I just like to show so you can see a quick example of what our lease versus buy summary looks like, and kind of understand how it can be a control point in the process, and ultimately where we can centralize that. The other end of the control point, the end. So end of term, want to cut down on evergreen. This is kind of a snippet from one of our dashboard reports on evergreen, so you can see where it's going up. That's usually a red flag, an area for companies to dive in and try to get a control on that. We have lots of automated reports that will go out asking, proactively ahead of time, letting you know these are coming up end of term, asking for updates with escalation policies embedded. We already talked about kind of all of the different segments that play into the data, but here's just a quick graph or kind of image of how we do our integrations. So this is just an example with fleet management. So you can see some of the providers there and ultimately how we get that data into Lease Accelerator. And then once we got that data in Lease Accelerator, what else can we do? So maybe sending the journal entries to your ERP, pulling master data like FX rates or IBR information from your ERP into Lease Accelerator, and then ultimately scheduled reports delivered by email as well. So you can see there's data going in and out of Lease Accelerator, making it that central place for all of your leasing data. Another kind of slide just summarizing the integrations between systems, how teams can be collaborative. So with real estate and accounting, what does that process look like? Where are there embedded control points along the way? Now, I said earlier, last polling question, this one isn't really a polling question, but if you would like a 30-minute lease lifecycle process review with Lease Accelerator, so myself or someone from my team, quick yes, no, or yes, but maybe at a later time, would really appreciate that from everybody. Now, I think we have maybe time for one or two quick questions from the audience.
Thank you so much, Blake. What an insightful presentation. Appreciate that. Yep, I do see that there are a couple of questions that have come in from the audience. The first question that came in is, what are the common risks associated with relying on manual processes in lease lifecycle management?
Well, that's a great question. I think There's a couple. The first is when it does come time for your audit. Anytime you're doing something in multiple spreadsheets or multiple systems, whether that's you use a system but you have to do the adjusting entries outside, it leaves room for human error and ultimately can impact your financial results. So when you're going through your audit, makes it more challenging, ultimately can make it more expensive when your auditors have to review all of these manual processes that you're doing, whether it's spreadsheets, maybe it's emails going back and forth that they're having to review. And then ultimately, if there is staff turnover, which happens, and communication or documentation is an email, that can get lost. So it really, really leaves room for errors that can be very costly, either in paying your auditors for extra work or costly from a material weakness or material finding standpoint.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for one more. Another question that came in is how can organizations ensure alignment between multiple stakeholders when managing lease life cycles at scale?
Yeah, another great question. I think that's a huge big error that a lot of or issue that we see with a lot of prospects or clients that are looking to move from just that compliance to generating some value off of their leasing space. So by having a single source of truth, having one place for all of your data where all of these organizations can look or receive information is really crucial. So that way, whether it's the treasury team knowing that all of their rates are updated in the system so that anytime a team runs a lease versus buy, they have that comfort and they can see what's being done. So in my opinion, it really comes down to visibility, giving a space where every team can either view their piece of the lease lifecycle or receive a report that's letting them know about their lease lifecycle. So that visibility is crucial, and having it all come from one system, I think, is the most important.
Well, thank you. We are out of time, so I appreciate, Blake, your wonderful presentation today. Such an incredible thought leadership session. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today for this session. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. And this does officially conclude the Argyle CFO Leadership Forum Future of Finance. Thank you again for joining us today and engaging in our content. We look forward to seeing you at our next Argyle Digital Finance event soon, which will be our SMB Finance Leadership Forum, Finance Innovations for SMB Growth, and that's on February 4th, 2025. Thank you again, Blake, and everyone have a great rest of your day.